The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome in, everybody. It's a brand new week, which means a brand new need to know. And we are so delighted that you've tuned in to listen whenever you're catching the program. We come to you just about every Monday morning to get things started and give you some things to think about. And again, make your own decisions. I'm not here to try to influence you or tell you what to think. I just like to point out my thoughts and see if you'll factor in some of those in helping you make rational decisions that are best for you and your family, loved ones, coworkers, neighbors, whoever that might be. A little bit of a variety this week of topics. We're going to talk about several different subjects, but they're all interrelated because in this arena of ideology right now that is being conducted in our country, to me, there are such absurd elements to it, and some of the things that are really topping the headlines right now are front and center to support that argument. So here we go. Let's talk about in Washington, the big debate right now, the House, barely with their slim majority, with the help of one Democrat, Cuellar from Texas, from down around the border. He came over to the Republican side in the House, which is a unpardonable sin usually because the Democrats almost always vote as a bloc. But that didn't make the difference, but it gave a little bit of breathing room to the margin. The House passed the Voter ID Act. Its initials are the SAVE Act, and that has been sent over to the Senate for consideration. Now, the Senate is planning, the Democrat wing of the Senate, who of course has a minority by 6 votes, 53 to 47. They can only lose a couple of votes on the Republican side and get it passed. And one of the holdouts had been Susan Collins from Maine, but it looks like some strong persuasion has led Collins to say, I think I'm going to stay with the home team here. They also perhaps have John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, in the bank, who has said that the voter ID law is not controversial. It doesn't make any sense, no sense whatsoever, that you have to have a driver's license, basically, to do anything, to rent a car, to fly somewhere, to cash a check at the bank. You show ID upon entering all kinds of different attractions and government mandated things. Having an ID these days is standard operating procedure for American people. Now, the Democrats argue that this is going to disenfranchise tens of thousands of voters because they're not going to be able to come up with a proper ID. And they actually single out, say, it's going to be problematic for many people living in rural areas or folks that are Black or Latino to comply with this law. What an insult. They say that the institution of this law requiring ID to cast a vote to prove that you are who you say you are and an American citizen, which, by the way, a little document called the Constitution calls for that kind of positive identification, not so much in the terms of driver's licenses, because back when those provisions were written, you didn't have to have a driver's license to operate your horse or your wagon. But the bottom line is, in modern day society, a driver's license or another acceptable government ID is absolutely essential pretty much to conduct any kind of life. And to suggest that Blacks and Latinos and people living in rural areas are going to be put out and made not able to vote because they are required to obtain an ID is so insulting. The Democrat argument is this is a racist law designed to exclude that segment of the American population from being able to vote. The racist initiative is what they say in suggesting that these individuals don't have the competency or the aptitude to acquire a viable ID. They also decry that many women who have been married and changed their names legally to the name of their husband may still have driver's licenses with their maiden name. And it's going to be such a difficult task for them to obtain a marriage certificate or their birth certificate to prove their identity. It's all a bunch of bunk. These people travel. These people go to the bank. These people conduct themselves in society with that requirement now. And this whole argument is so ridiculous. It's even more ridiculous when you look at polling. 76%. 76%. That's 76 out of 100 people that are registered Democrats say, as a voter, you should have to have an ID to prove your identity. Now, the Latinos and blacks, and they haven't even taken a poll in the, quote, rural areas of the country. I don't think there's any areas so rural that there's not some place nearby to get a driver's license or an ID. But blacks and Latinos by over 80% favor IDs to vote, and black Americans at 78%. This is an overwhelmingly slam dunk issue for all Americans. It is polling out about 80%, which is another one of these 80-20 deals where the Democrats are digging in, taking a stand, supposedly for the to avoid people being excluded from voting, but they're really just insulting these people that they are saying they're championing by suggesting that they are not capable of performing this very basic function. So it's just absurd. And the reason it's absurd is related to the next aspect of this topic, as they continue to fight tooth and nail to prevent as many people as possible, including convicted criminals, murderers, rapists, armed robbers, people guilty of assault, people guilty of audacious fraud and scam, and even worse, child molesters, convicted child molesters. And they're fighting to keep these people in the country because the dirty little secret, which I revealed to you several weeks ago here on this program, that our government in the shadows, particularly during the 4 years of the pseudo-Biden administration, which was really Barack Obama 3, because he was the wizard behind the curtain, pulling the levers and pushing the buttons, while his cast of characters surrounded this pretend president who didn't know what day it was, let alone how to run a country or institute any policies for the American people. Everything that was done in the 4 years, the 4 dark years between 2020 and 2024, were anti-American people. We had runaway inflations, this affordability that the Democrats are beating the drum about now, that Trump's not doing enough to address the needs of the American people. Well, the only reason the American people are in need right now is because of the ridiculous, absurd, just scandalous 4 years under the previous administration. Trump has made economic moves that are historic in impact. Every indicator right now is showing that American wages are coming up. Jobs are being created at a dizzying pace. Fuel, energy is down to prices that we haven't seen in years and years, almost cut in half in some places over the last 4 years. Bottom line is, we are going to see, when you start getting your income tax checks back, you're going to see an amazing infusion of money and opportunity. Manufacturing is coming back. Trump secured $17 trillion with a T, $17 trillion in foreign investment in American manufacturing, and that came from the institution of his tariffs, the tariffs which balanced the playing field finally after years and years and years under Republican and Democrat administrations of not addressing the disparity in the trade deficit, where we were paying about $375 million to import $375 billion to import our goods, and only collecting for the imports that people send into America that sell like hotcakes, because American consumers are the absolute most necessary group of buyers and spenders on the planet. We were only collecting a paltry $50 billion. 370 to 50? That is a ridiculous imbalance. And what it did was the imposition of the tariffs, which economic experts, of course, on the Democrat side of the ledger, and Democrat politicians scream from the rooftops, imposing these tariffs is going to cause runaway inflation, recession, and may trigger the next Great Depression. It was all bunkum. It was all nonsense. It was all politically motivated, ideologically motivated. If Trump was for it, they're against it, because anybody with common sense could see what was going to happen. The world was not going to stop sending products into America. The world has to have American consumers to survive. And so, of course, deals were made and goods and services still coming in. And now, to avoid tariffs, because so much of American manufacturing moved to these cheap markets overseas, now that they can't just ship in all of their products duty-free, basically, with no implications of having to pay to import or export, in their case, to import to America all of these products, they have to have American consumers. So Trump knew this. They cried uncle. They have to have American business to survive. And look what's happening now. All of these jobs that went overseas during the lost years of several administrations, predominantly the 8 years of Obama and the 4 bonus years of Obama under the veiled presidency of Joe Biden, now all of those jobs coming back to America because rather than pay the tariffs required for all the automobiles and products and services that have been importing to America almost with no implication, now it's going to be much cheaper to go ahead and bite the bullet, hire American workers at decent wages, at good wages, because it's still going to be economically more advantageous to make those products in America, and all of those jobs and all of that money is coming back to this country. And why do the people on the left side, on the Democrat side, fight so hard to keep all of these people in our country, as I mentioned before? Because they do not like anything Donald Trump is doing, because it's ruining the master plan, which I'm going to tell you about momentarily. I've mentioned it before, but maybe not in the detail that I'm getting ready to present it to you now. But they don't want anybody sent out of this country, because they know that when the economic boom comes back in and everybody is rolling here in a celebratory mood, the 250th birthday of this country, the small percentage of loudmouths that they have marching around in the streets and causing destruction and violence and provoking response from law enforcement officers that achieves the objective that they most desire, to have confrontation with federal law enforcement agents. When all of that chaos and unrest happens, they are happy campers, because they think that keeps their dream alive of keeping as many of these millions of people who walked into this country unescorted, unvetted, and undocumented, who are not legally here. The dirty little secret is with driver's license issued during the 4 lost years, over 3 million Social Security numbers were issued to these illegals, which guess what, folks, gives them the right. Well, not the right. It gives them the documentation they need to go and register to vote. And the Constitution emphatically says, if you ain't a U.S. citizen, you're not allowed to vote. But they need every single solitary one of them, whether they're criminals or scammers or fraud artists or killers or rapists or child molesters. They need everybody that they have issued a improper Social Security number, which is against the law. Everybody involved in that scam needs to be investigated, identified, and jailed, because that is a blatant violation of our Constitution to register people to vote. It's absolutely unconscionable. It goes against every principle this country's founded on, and it's just a self-serving ploy to keep the hope alive that they can somehow get control again of the White House, of the House of Representatives, and of the Senate in these next 2 years, between 26 election, the midterms for Congress this year, and the presidential election in 2028, because this is where they had made their move. They're all in. The chips are in the middle of the table, because starting in 1978, toward the end of the Jimmy Carter administration, the Department of Education was created, which gave the federal government the ability to interfere in what had been a perfect system of outstanding academic achievement and performance on the state and local level. But now the federal government got involved, and next thing you know, the curriculum in so many places was changed. Requirements were changed in terms of what people were to be taught, and it has created, 47 years after the implementation of the Department of Education, a society of dumbed down Americans. And that's not to insult them. These people that came up through the education system in the last almost 5 decades have not been taught history, have not been taught civics, do not have any understanding of how our government works or how it came to be, do not have any knowledge of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, everything, the building blocks that led to the formation of this nation, do not even have an understanding that everything that is in place in the United States is from Judeo-Christian principles that were brought here to adopt government under God, for the people, by the people, and of the people, by the people, for the people, which is you and me. It is not elites wanting to use their leftist impulses to drag our country into this collective kumbaya society where everybody ties for first place, everybody's the same. If you're exceptional or if you're a bum, it makes no difference. You have the same standing, because the elites need to be in control of the government. They need to be telling everybody what to think, and this is when they're making their move. When society and the electorate is dumbed down to the point where they don't know the dangers of Marxism and socialism and communism, and they don't understand that the producers, the answer to everything, you hear Mondavi right now, the mayor of New York, a communist. He's not a Democrat socialist or whatever ridiculous dichotomy of a title that party suggests. As I've told you many times, Democratic and socialist are not comparable terms. They are opposite terms. So Democrat socialist, my ass, he's a communist. And he is saying, we can pay for everything. Everything's going to be free. Everybody's going to live in this great environment because we're just going to tax the rich. Well, there's not going to be any rich to tax in New York because they're all getting the hell out of Dodge. And that's going to be the same case if all of this comes to fruition and this government is taken over, because the real goal, folks, and this is something I'm not speculating on, I'm telling the truth, the goal is to get control of Washington, D.C. again for this leftist radical movement, this socialist, communist, Marxist movement, and create, through the elimination of the filibusters, the passage of ridiculously biased election laws, redistricting laws, ways to make the game fixed. It will ensure one-party rule in this country for the next 100 years and completely transform our country, our government, and everything we're founded upon. And they know, they absolutely know, that the overwhelming majority of Americans, once they're clued into this, will never let that happen. There's been incursions and directions before of trying to initiate this socialist, Marxist, communist society in America, and it's been thwarted every time that it's risen up. At the beginning of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, again in the tumultuous 60s, where this leftist movement tried to take form, but was voted down and repudiated by the American people. And now they think they have the best chance ever. They're being financed by just multi-billion-dollar entities overseas because it's in their best interest for America to be weakened and brought onto the global stage. They want our resources. They want our wealth. They want our might, but they're not going to get it. If you wake up and look at what's happening here, this is the grand play. This is the big gambit right here. All the chips are in the middle of the table. They have to prevail in the midterms, and they have to win back the White House in 2028, and then we're screwed, folks. We are absolutely screwed. We become a third world hellhole communist country, and it's game over, game, set, match to the bad guys. So that's some pretty stern food for thought here, but it's something I thought you need to know to put in perspective. And one final message on that. You still hear people complaining about Trump's efforts in Venezuela to capture Maduro, who the Democrats have the audacity to say this guy was the duly elected president in a sovereign state of Venezuela. No, he was not. The fix was in every election. Most of the civilized countries around the world did not recognize this guy for any more than what he is, and that was a cartel-leading drug lord who was poisoning people, especially here in America, with all of this fentanyl and all of these illicit substances. And this guy making millions of dollars while the Venezuelan people suffered. Look at people from Venezuela now and people that have had to leave, the 8 million people that have been estimated to have bailed out of Venezuela. And Trump took this action not to seize Venezuelan oil, which they sit on the highest reserves of oil of any country in the world. Trump made this move to protect this hemisphere, our backyard, from Chinese incursion. The Chinese are desperate for energy sources. They burn now coal, which is the most inefficient and dirtiest form of energy, particularly in the way that they are using it. But Venezuelan oil was a huge, huge goal for Venezuela to obtain by continuing to financially support that corrupt regime. Donald Trump took critical insurance steps to seize Venezuelan assets, but it was not to enrich the United States. The Venezuelan people are going to be the beneficiaries of that. It is to keep China's thumbs, fingers, and greedy mitts away from accessing that abundant energy source, which would change everything geopolitically for not only America, but for the rest of the world. So that's the real story. That's what you need to know. I'm Kip Keefer. We'll talk to you again next week. God bless you all and have a very happy, healthy next 7 days.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.